Hello, everyone, and welcome back to episode 2 of my Universal Ride Rankings series. This time, we will be rating the 4 attractions in the New York area of the park. So let's just jump right into this. Now, you may be asking why I said 4 rides, and that is because I'm going based off of how the park groups the attractions, and not how I think they should be grouped, so you get 4 reviews this time. And just as a reminder, the 5 groups that I will be rating these coasters on, or not these coasters, these rides on, are facade, story, queue, average wait time, and ride experience. Let's start off with an attraction I almost forgot about, and that is Race Through New York starring Jimmy Fallon. Beginning with the facade, to me, it's just looks like a basic building in New York with a sign that has Jimmy Fallon on the side. So to me, it's unremarkable and plain and just meh. So I give it a 3. It's not bad. It's not very good either. Next, we have the story of the ride, which is you have been invited to the studio to take part in a race against Jimmy Fallon. Then, on the ride, you are just racing through the streets of New York, seeing different sights, and getting into the typical Jimmy Fallon shenanigans. The story itself is actually pretty fun, but the only place it really gets conveyed is before the ride in a pre-show. So it's not made very clear from the beginning when you get in the queue, but it is made very clear later on in the queue right before the ride, and it is a fun story, so I'd give it a 5. Not bad, but not good or great either. Then, there's the queue. Again, not overly impressive, it's kind of plain. The bottom section has the history of the Tonight Show, which is cool, I guess, if you like that kind of stuff. And then upstairs, some games and occasionally the show from the Ragtime Gals, which is cool, but then you enter the goggle pickup section of the queue, which is just some hallways with TV screens. The queue is very clean and sleek, but plain, so I give it a 3, because it's not great. Now we have the average wait time of 23 minutes. And I wouldn't wait that for this ride. I'd wait 10 minutes at the very top end, but not close to a half an hour. I'd give this a 3, because I would wait a little bit, but not very much. Then there's the ride itself, which is similar to Minion Mayhem, but it has 3D and is much smoother, the visuals are cleaner, and the combination of air and water effects are a nice touch. Plus the movements are smooth and the visuals are fun and cute. Like the giant hashtag the panda on top of the Empire State Building. But it is just a basic motion simulator ride, so I give the experience overall a 6. It's pretty basic, but not bad. The score for Jimmy Fallon comes out to a 20 out of 50. This is the first example of why I'm doing the ranking this way. When we look at the rides just based on what we feel versus breaking them down, we see that there's different parts to the ride. In my personal opinion, I much prefer Jimmy Fallon to Minion Mayhem, but Minion Mayhem has the better theming in most of the queue, the better facade, and I think the better story as well, which can sometimes be forgotten when just thinking about the ride experience. Nevertheless, let's move on to the next attraction, which is Transformers the Ride 3D. Which, to me, it's not New York, but this is what the park map says on the app, so yeah. Starting off with the facade, and honestly, it's pretty decent. The sign is pretty cool, and of course, there's the massive Optimus Prime statue on top that is just really cool. Then behind them, it's not just a plain gray building. There are pipes, mechanical pieces, and logos. Then you have the entry area with the glyphs and modern aesthetic that you can see while standing outside the ride. So overall, the facade for this is actually pretty cool, and I'd give it a solid 7. Then we have the story. You begin by entering the Nest base as a recruit before you get an alert that the Decepticons are coming to steal the Allspark. You must go and board evac to get yourselves and the Allspark out of the city. Once on the ride, you are chased by Decepticons and, of course, their leader Megatron, before you have to make the difficult decision to shove the Allspark in Megatron's chest to destroy it and him. The story is kind of basic. It's just that basic universal story where you're just thrown into the action. Like, here's a reason why you're here, and let's go, something went wrong. And it's kind of basic and not all that well conveyed in the queue. There are some videos throughout, if you pay attention, but you actually have to pay attention to catch the story. So I'd give it a 4. Moving on to the queue, and it's kind of The base, it's mostly just a bunch of concrete rooms with some boards on the wall and TV screens with weird lighting later on in the queue. But there are some cool artifacts from the movie, like the glyphs in the entry room, the Scorpion Transformer's tail, and of course the really cool Allspark replica and the containment unit later on. So I'd give the queue a 5. It's not great, but it has some cool elements. Now we have the average wait time weighing in at 29 minutes. Again, I definitely wouldn't wait that for this ride. I'd wait 10, maybe 15 minutes at the top end when I feel like riding it, because I really don't like it that much. But the queue isn't awful to stand in for the later portions, so I wouldn't wait almost a half an hour, but about half that, so I'll give this a 5. Then there's the ride experience. The sets are actually pretty good if you pay attention, and it really feels like you are traveling through a broken and ravaged city in the physical sets. And the screens are very clear with really cool visuals. I also have a lot of respect for the ride with the elevators and the amount of ride vehicles on the track. But the actual movement of the motion base is very jerky, and my head usually hurts. Well, my head and neck usually hurt when I get off. But the Megatron in the ceiling at the end is very cool. So I'll give the ride a 4. The theming is cool, but the movement is just way too jerky. This gives Transformers The Ride 3D a total of 25 out of 50. So exactly right in the middle. Next up, we have another ride that isn't really in New York, and that is Hollywood Rip Ride Rocket. I mean, Hollywood is literally in the name, but whatever. Beginning with the facade, the entry itself isn't very exciting. It's kind of just metal and plain, but what is cool is you are right next to the vertical lift of the ride. So I'd give this facade a 4 just because of the vertical lift. Now we have this story, which is what exactly? I mean, I guess apparently it's like, you've been invited to make a music video. I don't know. I'll just give the story a 1 and move on. Now we have the queue, which is literally just metal and concrete switchbacks under the station with an annoying video with like these characters from forever ago. I'm just giving this another 1. Now for the average wait time, which is 34 minutes. I mean, I'm not a big fan of the ride, but I'd wait about 15-20 minutes for it because I can stand waiting longer for coasters than I can for most dark rides. So this is a little high, but not awful. I'd give it a 6 for wait time. Now the overall ride experience, which I used to think was the absolute worst coaster at Universal and a bad coaster in general, but after a recent night ride, I actually enjoyed it. Now, the ride is rough, but there is amazing airtime on the entrances and exits to the brake runs. The valleys have good forces, the non-inverting loop has ejector airtime, the restraints are comfortable, but the music choices have been lessened, which is kind of sad. The ride is really fun, but rough. So I'd give it a 6. This ride's total score is 18 out of 50. This is, again, another example of a ride I would rank higher than most of the rides on the list so far, but this is actually currently in last place. And for the final ride, we have Revenge of the Mummy. Starting with the facade, we have a cool Egyptian-type facade for the Museum of Antiquities, and I think it's pretty cool. Not the best, but cool. So I'd give it a 7. Next up, we have the story, which is you are extras on the set of the filming of the new Mummy movie, called Revenge of the Mummy, but because of the cursed origin of the props and sets and the site where they are filming, something, of course, goes wrong, and Imhotep takes control of your ride vehicle and is trying to take your souls. The story isn't really conveyed very well through the queue because you go from like the front of a movie set to an Egyptian temple. It's a mediocre story and not really well conveyed, so I'll give it a 5. Now we have the queue, which I kind of explained before. You start by entering into the movie set of the new Mummy movie before you enter the first temple room then a small hallway, and a larger room filled with different temple props and other artifacts. You then climb the stairs and see a giant statue of, I'm pretty sure it's Anubis, before the load station. Overall, the queue is pretty solid. A little dark, but very well done. Not super cohesive from the beginning to the end, but it's still really cool, and I'd honestly give it an 8. Next up, we have the average wait time of 36 minutes. I mean, 36 minutes? Not bad. I'd wait that. It's a little long, but it's not bad. A decent queue, and the ride is very fun. So, I mean, 36 minutes is a little long. I'd probably wait closer to 25, 30, but I'd still give this a 7 for wait time. Then, the ride experience. The first dark ride portion is fun with the Emotep animatronic and then the massive room with him on the screen and the mummy statues, plus real fire. Then the reverse launch is fun and the turntable is unique. The main launch is super punchy, usually with an ejector pop at the top, and phenomenal laterals, and good forces in the dark throughout the whole twister section, plus a good floater pop on one airtime hill. Then we have the fire room and final section into the cup of coffee scene.
More if I had gotten my cup of coffee!
Thank you.
Which pulls some pretty good forces too, and the fire room is really cool. The ride is fun, but not the best, so I give it an 8. This brings Mummy's total to 35 out of 50. This is definitely the highest and best by far, and for me, this makes sense out of the ones that we've ridden. Next time, we will have Fast and Furious, as well as the Wizarding World of Harry Potter Diagon Alley. But that's all for this time, and we'll see you all next time on another adventure.